Hi, everyone. So let's begin. How many of you have seen an artwork, a painting, a sculpture in a gallery, or a museum or in art books? Maybe even a print of a famous artwork in your dentist or doctor's clinic. How many of you have asked yourselves after admiring an artwork, what is the story behind it? In many famous artworks, women seem to be a popular subject for artists. You have the Mona Lisa, painted by Da Vinci, whose smile remains a mystery and her identity continues to be unknown. Then there is the painting by Vermeer, the famous Dutch Mona Lisa, the girl with the pearl earring, again, whose life has been speculated in a novel and a movie. From cave paintings depicting women's lives to the 1985 poster by Guerrilla Girls calling out museums that the only women in it, 85%, were displayed and framed in the nude. I guess it's safe to say women are a frequent subject. But I ask you again, how many of us care to find out the stories of the women in the artwork? Let's talk about stories. Do you know the story of a famous little dancer, sculpture of artist Edgar Degas? The ballerina's name is Marie Van Gogh. She was 14 years old. She came from one of the poorest areas in Paris, known for prostituted girls and women. She worked hard as a ballerina, accepting the extra pay for posing for Degas' sculpture, which would make him very well known. Marie was part of the Paris Opera Ballet, the refuge of impoverished young girls holding on to the image of the opera, trying to earn some money, and pushed to entertaining male patrons who had backstage access to the young girls. After The Little Dancer was completed, Marie was fired from the opera for missing her lessons. Then she disappeared from public records. While Degas' masterpieces were celebrated, the artist will be remembered in history. The Little Dancer Marie, her story, her life isn't valued the way it should be. I have another artist in mind. He painted women in brothels and knows the names and even befriended many of his muses and subjects. The artist is Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. What has drawn me to his work is how he has shown the lives of prostituted women in France. He often painted them alone, without the men, showing their intimate moments, such as a simple brushing of the hair, or the daily struggles that come with their occupation, such as this next painting, where two women holding their skirts up, submitting without a choice, lined up to go through a medical exam conducted by the French state in order to prevent sexually transmitted diseases and continue satisfying the demand and commodification of women. Lautrec was showing their realities, not their bodies, not the sex. He was not displaying these women as objects. He was not romanticizing their pain. Instead, he was trying to make us viewers see them in a different light, one that is human and one with real stories. Let's discuss something more contemporary. So let's just say, what if there was an artist who wanted to tell the story of four women who were addicted to heroin? And the artist's work about these women was going to be exhibited in one of the most prestigious museums in Europe. The artist wanted to tattoo on the bodies of the women. The artist says they have their consent, that the women were hired, paid, and of course, the respected museum facilitated the process for the exhibition to materialize. Now, the artist known for his work focusing on exploited and invisible communities, from sex workers, illegal migrants, homeless, drug addicts, basically the disfranchised. It's been said the artist is known to employ such individuals to perform pointless repetitive, and often degrading task. Okay, so should we not raise the question, if these women were in the right state of mind to actually give their consent? Perhaps on paper, it may seem the women have made their decisions of their own volition. But because these women are used to surviving the streets, is it possible that the women who had a drug problem once again were manipulated or dominated? Do you think their story became visible? And more importantly, which part of the women's story do you think was genuinely shared? In light of the Me Too movement, which has encouraged many survivors of victims of violence against women to speak out, how would you feel if you shared in your personal social media platform how you experienced rape or sexual assault only to find your photos, your posts, exhibited in one of the sought after international art events? What if the artist printed it in a massive scale installation without seeking your consent and even placing a $300,000 price tag on it? Now, are there any ethical dilemmas here? Even if you have the legal rights or have found ways to use the information fairly, legally, this is the question that crossed my mind. Where is the accountability? Accountability in caring of the artist towards the woman or women who have been for centuries disregarded, her feelings, thoughts set aside for a bigger cause or purpose, they say. What do we do with their stories? How can artists be liberators when women's stories remain uncared for? How can we not participate as artists in, in exploiting women again, re-victimizing by resurfacing their trauma? How do we not take part in this vicious cycle of committing another layer of abuse on women, manifesting in a different form? When we talk about women's lives and their stories, why should artists feel answerable to the women they work with? As an artist whose work revolves around women's human rights and placing the stories of marginalized women at the core of my work, I always ask myself, whose story is it? Is it the woman's story or is it the artist's story? Since 2008, I have been facilitating community art workshops for women and girls centered shelters for victims of gender based violence and women and youth victims of human rights violations in urban poor and far flung conflict zones. I always felt my art and cause are intertwined. Okay, I'm gonna share with you a story of a 15-year-old girl I met over a decade ago. This young girl was pregnant at 15. She was prostituted by the cops since she was 12, locked in a room where men take turns raping her. She was threatened, she couldn't fight back. She was 12. No one could stop the cop. He carried a gun. This gun threatened the girl, her life, her family. She focused on this gun as she was violated and raped. She shared with me how she felt old at the young age of 12 and how tired she was at 15. After getting to know her for 3 years, we parted ways. We remain in touch from time to time, but this image of the gun stuck with me. I wanted to tell her story without making her relive the pain and trauma. I asked permission when she was of age, then an adult, and she gave her consent. So I made the work, looked for the exact gun from that actual Philippine cop, and found the lace fitting to tell the story. This is Quince. I am both a woman and an artist. I am bound to create, but I am aware I have an obligation to women as well. I am indebted as much as any artist. The artist owes the women for entrusting their truths. their voices being molded and formed into tangible narratives. The art and the artists are merely vehicles. We are mediums to women's voices. So, why should artists tell women's stories with great care? It's simple. The story belongs to the women. When we recognize that the story belongs to the woman or the women, when we practice caring for women's stories, this helps destabilize the status quo and combat repressive powers of society and institutions. As what I've learned from bell hooks, to resist being participants in exploiting, oppressing, and dominating women, minds and hearts need to change. It is compelling to re examine the power, reflect on the contribution of art in telling women's stories for others and for every woman. As artists who attempt to confront difficult conversations and seek social justice through our work, artists must not fail to heed accountability. Women's once silent stories can spark a revolution when told with great care. Because women's stories is every woman's story.